finish reading, I need to get up again for just a minute and thank some people, and then we'll be done. Thank you. Naomi Jaffa.
If you can't hear, please stick your hands up. Don't take this personally, but I might persuade myself that I definitely still fancy you rotten. If only you'd have a good wash. Perhaps slosh a dash of Givenchy. Install a power shower even. Then maybe we'd stand an outside chance of staying together longer than an instant coffee in the morning, which is already looking much too far ahead. Basically, I'd really like it if you were gone now, out of my bed, back to wherever it was you said you lived. Was it Highgate? And I'd be very grateful if you didn't show up at work on Monday as the office equipment salesman who still looks just like that actor who I lusted after for the whole of last week because of an Irish accent and a name like Gabriel. I guess the first 3 poems I'm going to read are all about men. Probably about me and men. The next one is getting away from the kind of smelly reality to sort of fantasy, really. I don't know how many people here have heard of an actor called James Mason. Okay, not very many. That's fair enough. That's fair enough. It's a really long time ago, English actor, black and white films, incredibly potent, sarcastic, amazing guy. And there aren't any equivalents now. I mean, Hugh Grant doesn't come close. So, anyway, I like James Mason. And I grew up quite strictly being taken for walks when I was a child in a park, which I really hated. But then when I sort of turned into an adolescent, I suddenly discovered it was quite good, particularly if you had the kind of ultimate fashion accessory. So this is Girl with Afghan. I hope you all know what Afghan hounds are. Big, hairy, beautiful dogs. Exuberant and barely trained, I was told never to let Tsar off the lead, no matter how much he tugged to run wild and explore the great invitation of grass and other dogs. So we bounced along together, me in my favourite helping out at the stables shirt and faded Wranglers with embroidered flowers, throat burning, stitch tearing my side. And together we ignored the Sunday footballers who whistled and made me blush each time the two of us loped past. Perhaps this week he'd be waiting on that bench. I always had trouble imagining his face, but knew he'd have James Mason's voice, and would glance up from his book at the right moment, clock the dog, and then, full pelt at the end of the leash, the stunning girl. Something better than laces coming undone would make me stop so our eyes could meet. I'd sit down, cool, not out of breath, and soon he'd touch my cheek, stroke my waist-length hair, take my hand, and then just talk to me, understand I was lost and simply seeking to be found. Do you know what a scourer is? You know, the things that you scrub dishes with when you need to get, the sticky bits off. Okay. Well, I just checked because Tom said almost, we speak the same language, but almost, so I have to check. There's a reference in this next poem to Queensway Rink, which is a kind of famous ice skating rink in London. And a clutch, stick shift, yeah, okay, just checking. Sorry. You'd lose the whole poem if I didn't. Okay. This is the scourer. And I didn't meet my first love walking in the park with a dog. I met him at university. But he was American. He was from Middlebury. The scourer. Your first boyfriend couldn't have known that in pinching the pad from the kitchen sink to give your polo the polish of a lifetime, he'd leave an impression on the paintwork like a day's worth of skaters on Queensway Rink. A hard worker, happy to cover every inch, you'd always before appreciated his diligence. Your father had problems with everything about you and the car. A gift from your grandfather, he insisted on testing it first, just to make sure. With you tensing beside him, he drove the length of the village, down the sharp hill to the main road, where he promptly forgot how to use a clutch. This car will take you places beyond his grasp. It'll need a respray. Someone's going to pay, he said, as your beloved flared for a long cliff-top walk. You sent your sister to coax him home to where your mother sat on the fence feeling torn in two, and you learned the consequences of using your parents' bed for your first time and a pan scourer to scrub a car. My late father was a really popular violinist. He was kind of a household name in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And he was a tiny guy. He was really short, but he was a big presence. And so when he died, it was, a big deal. I mean, everyone's father dying is a big deal. But anyway, it felt kind of momentous the day he died that this was going on too. So this is unrehearsed. On the afternoon Pavarotti sang in Hyde Park, the heavens opened and my father died. From her voice I knew, and although the deadline had been and gone, I bolted through stair rods. London was gridlocked. Taxi drivers urged me underground. People ignored the news leaking from behind my eyes. It was quiet at home and safe, and we cried together quietly so as not to disturb his departure. When skin no longer breathes, it yellows and grows cold. One-sided conversation soon runs dry. Trousers stain and smell without embarrassment. Everything and nothing is too late. It was strange and live and unrehearsed, and all I could think was vacant possession. What was the weather like yesterday? It was identical. We think we don't get hurricanes in England. Well, we did that day. So he died, and he kind of really disappeared. Not just physically, obviously, but sort of mentally, emotionally, psychically. I just kind of lost him completely. And then he came back in dreams while I was in India I'll tell you in the poem, later anyway. And it gave me this poem it gave me the title for my chapbook, and it was just lovely to have him back. I think this is probably my happiest poem. And it's called The Visitor. And the trains in India sound just like that. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. The Visitor. As far as I know, he never even liked it here. But quite suddenly, after staying away almost 9 years, my father is back to visit me in Kerala, South India. In the middle of the night, as you'd expect. In the middle of the night, as you'd expect, but also during the afternoons, around tea time, riding the same air horn blasting, hot and dusty trains. And he seems to like to call, especially before breakfast, during that last hour of sleep in hotel bedrooms. He looks about 60, but to be truthful, to date him accurately, I'd have to compare him to the photos. Definitely he's much happier. Just the other morning he arrived, shorter than me as usual, and swept me off my feet, lifted me right off the ground, and hugged me for no reason. Put me down. I'm much too heavy. Put me down. You'll break. But he didn't, and he doesn't, and my toes never touched our old gold top-floor landing carpet. He fills out his trousers again, and his cheeks are back to normal, fat, tanned, glistening and clean-shaven. I kiss him, inhale that mix of Gillette foam and Floris rose geranium, and all the time he dizzies me with smiles. I hesitated about this next poem because it seemed to have a lot of things that needed explaining in it, but I don't think it's that complicated. Football is soccer in your terminology, and I don't have much to do with either. But this next poem gave me a way into putting some famous footballers in our country who you'll have never heard of into the poem, which is fine. They are good footballers, and the thing I shared with them is that the injury that I sustained last year to my knee is a classic footballing injury, so that was good. I also managed to get some medical terminology into this poem, and I love these words so much, and so just enjoy the sound of the words, because I don't know really what they mean. And I got a lot of drugs into this poem as well, which was good. And I also got one of the most irritating phrases that anyone I know has ever said to me, and they used to say it a lot, and it used to drive me mad, and I bet you'll spot it. And it's called knee. Oh, one more gloss, sorry. Belfast, the Troubles in Northern Ireland, they had a kind of regular punishment that was meted out, which is in the poem as well. Knee. At last, an affinity with footballers, with Gazza's agonised rictus, and all the Shearers and Van Nistelrooys who risk again the full tilt feint, pivot, and change of direction. Hell, I envy anyone who can run upstairs 2 at a time and pelt back down. A connection, too, with those Belfast men, women got tar and feathers, and their shattered patellas. Perhaps it's like bullying, gunmen only doing to the kneecaps of others what's been done to their own. Months of rehab, no such thing as a full recovery. But where do I stand on lapses of attention? The fat woman who did hers water skiing across the kitchen floor, or my trip off a plank? Of course I object to the 1:30 and 4 a.m. grope for the ice pack, the unthinkable depression of any clutch, no more squatting onto heels. I'll survive 2 feet to 1 step, crutches, the lunatic swerve of the Tesco trolley, another 3 months out of the saddle. But 1 torn anterior cruciate and medial collateral ligament, plus extensive bone bruise and osteochondral fracture of the femoral condyle later, and yes, pain is finally my friend. I encourage him to socialise. Diclofenac, tramadol, codidromol, even Celebrex, but he won't play ball. Steals back alone to drag me down to earth. Now I get it. Give me a gun and a dark night, wasteland or wet alleyway, real friends to hold his leg. How are we doing for time? I don't think this next one needs any introduction at all, except I don't even know if I'm allowed to read it on campus, but I'm going to do anyway. So. And it's called Last Cigarette. Not wanting to be caught in the act, she swallowed it, but kept on tasting smoke, feeling the glowing tip slowly progress down her esophagus like an orange beacon, a tracker device. She ran into the nearest bar for water, but with no makeup or money, couldn't bear to ask the barman, even as the burning in her gullet grew stronger and grey wisps began curling from her nostrils, the corners of her lips, out of her ears, and, she was sure, in a long plume from her bottom. She longed to call the fire brigade, surrender her last cigarette to hoses and hydrants and men in shiny helmets who tell her to stay calm. They'd have her sorted, right as rain in no time. Great way of not writing about yourself, which I do find difficult, is to invent a personality. And this next one is, well, she'd never be so stupid as to smoke, I guess. She's fairly insufferable, I think. And she's called Charlotte. When all's said and done, she's very little like me. For a start, Charlotte rarely gives her real name, knows life isn't a dress rehearsal, and never pretends to come when she hasn't. In fact, I've never heard her say yes when she means no, absolutely not. To date, her life has been a lovely, clean, straight line, and in the mornings, no crises about not looking good or what to wear. If, by chance, she weighs more than 10 stone, she still allows herself toast, butter, and marmalade, and not just a pink grapefruit and black tea. But generally she won't devour a family-sized bag of MSG-enhanced roast chicken crisps between 11 and 11:07 a.m. In this way, her days proceed more or less as planned. No cutting things so fine she starts to sweat or shallow breathe. Not one prone to guilt trips. She doesn't understand why people are so mean to their mothers or lovers or indeed how they can be. And believe me, Charlotte is neither stupid nor without a heart. Her attitude to skincare is particularly refreshing. She does not think it essential at 1 a.m. to remove every trace of mascara when most of all her eyes need sleep. To my best knowledge, Charlotte has never been unfaithful or unable to look herself full in the face. Neither has not having children been much of an option. So true is she to her faith, to her biological optimism, that everything comes to those who wait. Talk. I hate the thought of them later, speculating about my future, after an evening when we've passed the spotlight around considerately for just enough risk-free intimacy. My friend has recently lost her father, and we touch on this gently, bringing out none of the bruise. Her husband is back that afternoon from 2 weeks and 5 time zones with his 26-year-old assistant, whom he describes while stroking his wife's feet, remarking how pretty her varnished toes look. They will have sex later, all is well. The tricky moment comes when my friend, to whom I once confessed everything, asks me point blank what's going to happen. Fuck knows, I say, then feel the room tighten. The candles hold their breath as I explain carefully how, after such a lovely supper and it being so late, that now is not the time to talk. Okay, this is the 2-poem warning. This is my most recent poem, and I don't think it needs any glossing. It's called Deal. I make a deal with myself after the first night, a way of testing the water, morning cuppa, the new duvet light, the white cotton crisp, early sun turned to rain, clattering the rooftop opposite, the grey slates awash and darkening like the opening to a French film. I resolve to be happy or sad in this house, this new life, according to whether or not my crumpled list of moving instructions lands in the unfamiliar wastepaper basket in the corner of this bigger bedroom. A miss, and all here will be hopeless. Why then do I feel this quick quiver of disappointment when I throw the perfect shot? O monster of my self-pitying heart. Before I read my last poem, I can't begin to thank you enough for coming in such multitudes. It's fantastic. And many thanks to Georgia Tech for inviting us, and obviously in particular to Ginger Murchison, who guided us through the most incredible jungle of forms to get us legally into this country. She deserves several medals, not just one. And particularly to Tom for just making this possible. It's just, well, a friend of his said, do we get to do this a lot? And I said, oh yeah, all the time. We're always jetting around the world, reading to audiences of 300 or however many there are. This is a first, and it's very exciting. So thank you for listening. It's great to be reading in America. I mean, it's where all my favorite poets are, so it's fantastic. Okay, this is a last poem, which Tom has heard an earlier version of when he did a workshop in the UK last summer. Hopefully it's improved. Okay. It's called Taking Up Our Posts. So here we are, back again this morning, still waiting to take up our posts. See, his first flight, his first ever wheels off and back down onto tarmac, and despite all those couples holding hands and him having no one's hand to hold, see, no fireball reduced him to poems and dental records. Admit it, your best friend and your sister failed to die in childbirth, despite the hospital refusing all night to give out details. Look how your mother survived the anesthetic, the week of post-op wobbles and blood clot risks. Your grandfather outliving double pneumonia. Your father's violin strings taut to almost 80. No one knows who will go first or how. The man jumping from the 40th floor, shot by mistake from a window on the 20th, by his mother threatening his father. The quiet woman in their street, eating alone with her aneurysm, undiscovered for 2 weeks, the window dark with flies. The brother and 2 sisters from the village swept downstream, saving the family dog. A friend's husband with a no-hope pancreas, teeth turned black and gone by Christmas. Yet still I manage to wake each day flirting, the pull of the wheel to stay on the right, the lip of the cliff, the vein on my wrist, infidelity landing me at the bottom of the stairs, the mare cartwheeling, everything hemorrhaging, but not yet, while I'm still busy counting my blessings, busy preparing to take up my post.